A quick note before we start the show today, folks. I'm in the process of creating a relationship retreat for listeners, and I would love your feedback about what would make such a retreat valuable for you. So if you've got a second, please do me the kindness of filling out a short survey. I think it'll take you less than 4 minutes, and I put a link to it in our show notes. I certainly appreciate it. And now on to the show.
And so there's this other part of my brain too that was trying to rationalize, like, wait, but we have amazing sex, and like he gets super turned on by me, and like so there's a part of me that wanted to call bullshit. Like,
right.
What do you mean bullshit that you're not attracted to me?
I'm Eric Newton, and this is Together, the podcast where we explore the truth about human relationships. As a divorce lawyer, I saw thousands of couples break up firsthand. These days, I'm not so interested in breaking couples up, nor in keeping them together. I'm interested in what our relationships can teach us about ourselves and the world that we live in. So on this show, we have honest conversations with real people about real relationships. My guess is that this interview is probably going to trigger you in one way or another. And I say that's a good thing. In my view, our triggers tell us who we are and where to dig for personal growth, and we probably ought to face them more often than we do. But whether or not you do get triggered by this conversation, I suggest you listen to our guests today from the perspective of trying to understand what each of them is going through individually. And I say this because that's what they're doing, and it works. Our guests today, Bob and Natalie, are both personal development coaches, and I think it's fair to call them personal development geeks. They live and they breathe this stuff, and in fact, they first met and arguably fell in love at a personal development conference of sorts. And incidentally, if you'd like to hear the story of how they met, I'll post that for subscribers on our Patreon page, and there will be links to that in our show notes. Okay, now we're picking up the conversation just as Natalie is telling us how and why she asked Bob to have a very difficult conversation.
I'm a very intuitive person, and so one day we were hanging out, we were like cuddling on the bed or something, and I just kind of possessed, like, turned to Bob and say, "What do you think about my body?"
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you feel, well, you know, if you trusted her, you probably didn't think it was a trap.
Oh, no,
But
that
on the
never
other-
occurs.
But
I could see how
mean,
it could be taken like
right?
that.
Yeah.
Totally, yes.
But on the other
yes.
hand, you got to be
Oh, yeah.
scared about how you're going to answer this.
Yeah, like
well.
our relationship is not, like, I never ever would think that she's trying to trap me into something, but it was vulnerable, though.
Oh yeah, it was.
Okay, say
it
more.
was
Say-
one of
And
those.
here's
huge-
the thing is that I had actually been doing my own work on this piece. I'd been getting supported from my friends around it.
Oh, that's right, because you were talking about it with your guy friends at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's like something that I probably felt that he was in the inquiry around it, and
So, well, but there's trap and there's trap. There's the intentional trap in an unhealthy relationship where you're trying to create a co-dynamic thing or whatever it's called, you know, and catch your partner out. But then there's also just like,
Did we need to talk about that kind of thing?
yeah, a conversation that could open up a giant cavern that maybe you're not ready to explore.
Well, we clearly were ready. It just popped out of her mouth, apparently.
yeah,
And
because I could feel something, I just wasn't sure what it is.
Yeah.
So I really came from a very curious place. I prepped myself before we opened this conversation.
You were
'cause-
ready for...
Yeah, because I'm also sensitive. I'm super sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I could potentially be opening up a can of worms.
Okay, so she asks this very open-ended question.
yeah.
And what's your response? What was your response in your body?
I think it wasn't like the most. It was vulnerable to say, but like I said, I'd been processing this piece already. Is that her body type is not one that I've typically been attracted to, and yeah, I don't remember what my response was in that
You
moment.
cried.
But did I cry?
You cried.
which is not unusual.
Yeah.
When you say vulnerable, you say it was vulnerable for
It's
me.
scary
Does that
to
mean-
tell a person who I love and care about a lot that I'm not attracted to their body.
And scary because
Because
He doesn't want to hurt me.
yeah, because I don't want to hurt her, and I make myself really wrong for it. Also, it makes me feel like a piece of crap. That of like what a shallow. Yeah, it makes me feel like a piece of crap that I'm judging people on how they look rather than this beautiful, deep connection that we have, and it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me too.
yeah, it makes you feel like something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
That you would think that.
Yeah, and I don't want to hurt her feelings, so there's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said it, and did he start crying as he was saying it, or how did that express itself?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could tell that,
I can't even remember how it went.
yeah, no, it was,
You could tell that he'd been thinking about it for a while.
yeah, and that it was just bringing up a lot of shame and a lot of, like, hurt. And then he did start telling me that he's been talking about it with his friends and trying to kind of, like, get to the bottom of it, but then saying that, you know, there is this part of me that doesn't find your body attractive, isn't attracted to your body. And yeah, it was.
So I don't know what I felt back then, but even in this moment, I noticed my belly tightening up and my kind of like feeling shame, like not wanting to kind of like stoop my head down, not feeling like I can look people in the eyes as much, and yeah.
And I think I might have started having conversations around kind of my viewpoint of it, of, you know, I didn't find you attractive in the beginning, but to me it's like something that
Well, you didn't go there
grows.
right away, did you?
No, I mean, I let Bob kind of have his space and
Yeah.
kind of have his you know, experience.
So that would have taken an immense amount of self-control, I would imagine, for
Well,
most
we're,
people.
we're both awesome at relating, to toot our own horns.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, like the
So-
holding of space for the other person.
and have it
while-
not be about you, because you just asked a
Yeah.
question about you,
Yeah.
and about something that is for many women one of the most intimate elements of who they are.
Yeah.
And in our
And-
society particularly.
And that was the thing for me, is like literally it's more okay to bring up I had an affair than I think you're unattractive.
yeah. Yeah. You never tell
Just
your
the
woman.
very last thing
Yeah.
on the list
And
that,
we're not
that you tell the person you're with.
Right.
Yeah.
Ever. In our culture
Yeah.
for sure, but maybe anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So how did you not get reactive?
That's a good question.
Well, she did. I mean, we're both excellent at being, like, we're very self-aware, and we know what it's like to hold space for other people. But
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of had delayed reactions too, you know, because there's a little bit of it that's a little bit of shock too, right? Like, I'm thinking these things and I have these feelings, and now I'm hearing it, right? And so there was a little bit of a kind of shock, like, oh God, what I felt was right. And then still wanting to be curious, because I want to know what's happening for him, and I love him, and I see he's visibly, like, torn up about it. Like, this is an area that is so hard for Bob. Like even as I talk about it, like, I want, you know, my heart hurts and I want to cry, because, like, this eats away at him a lot
Still.
still.
yeah, like I'm saying, in this moment, it's
Still.
still bringing up shame.
You had reactions to all that, Natalie, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But I'm curious, how did you come back and say, well, here's what I'm thinking, without it being like a counterattack?
I mean, I think a lot of it is that I've done a lot of work and I've studied relationships for a really long time, in that place of, you know, as cheesy as they sound, the, like, I statements, you know, the just wanting to let him know, well, this is what it's bringing up for me.
Yeah.
And I think I did mention that night of, you know, I have had body stuff. Like, I actually did for a long time not love my body and didn't think I was attractive. And so I'm noticing how this conversation is kind of poking that a little bit,
Yeah.
you know, and So just trying to stay as much in just sharing, relaying what's happening for me. I was trying to do that.
Yeah. Did it happen that same night? Do you recall?
Yeah, I mean that we talked for probably a good 2 hours that night. He's like, I don't remember a thing.
It is telling how intense it is.
Yeah, no, and it was. I mean, I don't, and I still don't remember a lot of the conversation either, because I was also feeling a lot. Because it was kind of like an out-of-body experience, because you're kind of there and kind of with them and kind of listening to what they're saying, but at the same time, I'm like, is this really happening? Wait, and so there's this other part of my brain too that was trying to rationalize, wait, but we have amazing sex, and he gets super turned on by me, and so there's a part of me that wanted to call bullshit,
right.
What do you mean bullshit that you're not attracted to me? We have amazing sex, and so that was happening too.
What's the answer to that, by the way?
We have this really deep, energetic connection. The moment that she puts her body next to mine, I get turned on.
But it comes back. It still makes me wonder, what the heck is attraction? Okay, so with you do see him and you're attracted to him, but he's not your type. How's that?
It grew on me. So it was the kind of when I first looked at him, not attracted. Then I got to know him and I started curiosity piqued. I'm finding him attractive more and more as a person.
Just as a person.
Yeah, as a person. And then, but I even made that joke about it one time where I was and then it was a gift where you unwrap the wrapping and then you realize what's inside, because I was his body actually does turn me on like a package. I'm like, oh wait, but there are certain parts that I do find attractive, and then the other parts that I might not I'm not as concerned, because I love him and I'm just attracted to him, and our growing connection is what has me more and more attracted to him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's different for women though, because I've heard that it's different for women.
I hear that from women all the time.
Yeah.
What you just described sounds very common with women.
I know, I hear it too.
Yeah, and but there's this whole opening for attraction. There's this whole universe of attraction that's available with or without that. I'm just remembering I wrote an article about it when I first launched the site called Good News, Your Ideal Mate Does Not Exist.
Ooh, nice one.
The way I see it is, we all have this ideal of an ideal mate, and sometimes it presents as a physical type, or sometimes it presents as a much more robust story about place in the world and identity and other issues. But we have this idea of an ideal mate that has been with us since we were very young. And we all carry it around with us. And in fact, we have a kind of relationship with our internal ideal mate. We dialogue with them. You know, we reference that ideal all the time, internally, consciously and unconsciously, compare them to the people in our actual lives. And then people don't match up because they can't. Because
right.
Nobody can ever possibly match up to this internal ideal. And the comparison, the gap, is where the pain resides in a relationship. But the funny thing is about it, we both have an internal ideal that our partner doesn't match and cannot match. I am not the ideal for Aubrey either. And yet we have this relationship with the internal ideal and are shamed about it. So if we can face it and acknowledge it and allow it and then share it with our partners, knowing that they also have one as a way to diminish the shame, then we can be with who we're actually with and then decide if we want to, which we might not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's you're actually having you're able to make choices based on reality.
Yeah.
I do notice myself doing that sometimes with Bob, where we'll be in a situation and he won't be with me in the way that I want him to be with me, or say the thing that I want him to say, or and then I'll go to this place of, oh, maybe if I was with my person, person would say that. Yeah.
You do?
Yes. I totally do.
Okay, now that was a year ago. I let that first interview sit for a while because it just didn't feel complete to me. And last week, I called up Bob and Natalie, and we recorded the following conversation. Now, to give you some background, they're not back together as a committed couple, but they're not entirely split up either. Natalie says that the relationship is undefined, and she likes it that way. You know, I gotta say, I love that you guys have allowed the relationship to continue. You know, there's endings in some ways are artificial. You know, that they're useful and what have you, but they're also structured. And I like that the two of you have just allowed it to take for the stream to carve its new pathway.
Yeah, that's
and
a beautiful way to put it. Mm-hmm.
And so I find that beautiful, and I can also imagine somebody listening. I can hear a little bird in the back of my own head saying, "But if he's expressed that he's not attracted to you, why are you sticking around?" In any capacity.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I feel like I actually had someone ask me that the other day. But then when I actually sit down and explain the situation with them, it makes more sense. And I think, so to sum it up, there's a way that now I've learned to kind of look past the words out of Bob's mouth. I've literally told him sometimes I think I need to just stop listening to the words out of your mouth, because a lot of that comes from a place of kind of trauma and wounding for him, and his body says something totally different. I mean, I know he loves me. I know in my soul, my body, that he's really attracted to me, but I would get so caught up and fucked up in my head. I cussed, but it would just throw me for a loop when I would, I guess, kind of get caught up in his own confusion around it. Because there was a way that he was kind of confused himself and dealing with that confusion around it. And so in the moments that I'm actually able to kind of be still and be confident in my own knowing, my knowing says he's really attracted to me, and continues to open up. And that's also the beautiful part of this year of staying connected ever since we kind of uncoupled, is that I see that part really growing. The more Bob heals, and I mean, he's been doing intense healing work for the last year. The more he heals around those parts, the more I feel him connected to me, and the more I feel his appreciation for my body, the more I feel his sexual energy. A lot of that stuff has been shifting.
Yeah. And I'll say also that all of that has, and you can speak more to it, but I know from our conversations that this whole process has also dragged up all of this old stuff around body shame for Natalie that had still been existing in there that she wasn't totally aware of.
Natalie, you have this way of talking about this that sounds, your vocal inflections sound totally untriggered. You sound so peaceful about this. But this is a thing that in our culture is the thing that, for better or worse, you're supposed to take the most seriously about yourself.
Yeah.
Or one of the things, at least. And yet you talk about this with such composure and such openness. Is it an act? Are you? Are you faking it till you make it, or are you really that composed about it?
So in the moments that I can actually kind of, when I'm calm, it's because I have done a bunch of kind of healing around it, and I can pull back and realize oh my God, my body's actually amazing. And regardless of what anyone else says, at a certain point, I was my body type was coveted by the, Parisian and Italian artists back in the Renaissance, and they were painting women like my body. But obviously in this day and age, I would be considered kind of chubby, curvy, and maybe even fat, right?
Really?
And so, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely have an ass and hips and a little belly. I definitely have. I mean, it's a love pooch. But so, I mean, in those ways, I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, I think I have a gorgeous body, but when I'm healthy about it, but when I'm not, and then when those things would come up between Bob and I, like it kind of in some ways would annihilate me, because I would just be like, oh my God, my body isn't beautiful. And it's not the idea of kind of what men fantasize about and drool over. And maybe they were all right. Like maybe my body isn't beautiful and maybe there is something wrong with it and wrong with me. And so I kind of have yo-yoed. So, I mean, the times that I'm calm about it, it's because I'm able to kind of take a bit more of a witness, like pulled back perspective around it. But man, Eric, when I'm in it, I'm fucking in it.
Yeah,
Like, and
okay.
It's like not pretty.
And do you start blaming Bob in those moments?
I don't know if I would say blame's a strong word, but I think there definitely have been times that I've just let him know that our interactions around this stuff have definitely traumatized me.
I'll say that our go-to pattern is not blaming each other.
True.
It's like blaming ourselves and then withdrawing.
Yeah.
That's what you each do naturally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. Here's what I want to say about my opinion about your body, if I may. I think you're very beautiful, and I think that there are men out there for whom you would be definitely their type, and also the kind of men that you would like as men.
Yeah.
So why not go be with them?
That's a good question. I guess I don't see it as I'm not out there being with them and I'm choosing Bob over these people. I mean, in a lot of ways, I am also selective with the partners that I am with and really need it to have a strong emotional connection to. So yeah, I guess I don't see it as I'm choosing not to be with people that would worship my body. I've definitely been with people that have, and I'm also bisexual, so I've been with women as well that love my body. And so yeah, I guess I don't see it as that as much as it's got to be a fit on all levels for me to be able to feel comfortable enough to open myself up sexually.
Well, but that's not what I thought you were going to say, because that seems like then that Bob is definitely not a fit.
In what way?
Well, because
I
you
feel
said he
like
has to be a
there's-
fit on all levels, and if he's not attracted to you, and let me be clear, I'm talking
Yeah.
about it right now in a very black and white way in order to kind of
totally.
root into to dig into the question, and I think it's much more nuanced than this, but
Yeah.
in order to try to understand the question better, let me continue in this vein, and that's that even if Bob is unconsciously, let's say, attracted to you, even if his body does respond with passion to you, his mind is getting in the way consistently and telling him that that's not the case. And that, if you're saying that there has to be a fit on every level, then that is a level I would think you would define it as not a fit, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good question, and maybe that's part of the reason we've kind of had to reconfigure a number of times. Because it is another paradox, right? Because even though there's this kind of way that it mentally gets in the way, there's another way that I feel the most safe with Bob around sex. And like, I've actually gone places with him sexually I've not gone with anybody.
Wow.
Explored these places that I never felt safe enough to, but because of his love for me and the trust we have and this kind of spiritual connection that we have. And that's the part where I'm like, okay, I trust my body.
You're asking about me if my heart says one thing and my head says another, just to paraphrase. Well, Natalie's heart is saying one thing and her head is saying another thing. So more and more, ultimately, we're just learning to relate to each other from our hearts and not from our heads.
Or yeah, okay, that's or from the amalgamation of all of them in some way. It seems like.
Yeah, well, and I'll say, and more we're learning in just this exquisite way to actually take the stuff that has screwed us up and fucked us up in our connection in the past and actually be able to transmute it literally in the moment and use those moments as ways that actually create more connection.
I've noticed in a lot of relationships that I've witnessed that there's because bodies change throughout the relationship. We all know that. And attraction waxes and wanes. But the emotional intimacy can continue to build, or at least generally be on an upswing over time. And that emotional intimacy seems to, for a lot of people, end up with a great sexual intimacy. But it takes a while. We all have to, it seems like humans have to get through that dopamine phase, that serotonin high, where you're in the honeymoon of your relationship and into this deeper, richer, kind of longer term vein of the relationship to find access to it. And that transition, I've seen it be a real doozy for a lot of people. And I saw a lot of people divorcing during that phase when I was a divorce lawyer. But you guys have come at, and I think that that's at least one way of looking at what you guys are dealing with. But what makes your situation unique is you've come at it from a different, earlier, and from a different direction of being really articulate about it to one another.
Yeah. Well, and we're both committed to our own inner work. We're both really aware, pretty darn aware for the most part, that anything that's getting in the way of our connection is about, if it's getting in the way for me, it's about me.
That's lovely.
I go work on it and I get freed up from it.
Yeah.
I do my best to get freed up from it. And we're both deeply committed to that process.
That's really great. And what I'm trying to be careful not to insert my agenda here, but to really inquire if you are moving on that pathway or if I'm just making up that that's what you guys are doing. I'm trying to find out if, are you guys, you, Bob, are you finding that the emotional intimacy and this body level attraction that you have for her is what actually matters?
I think like the emotional intimacy is so much the essence of all of it. I might be closed up and emotionally stuck around something, and then I have a cry, and all of a sudden I've got a heart on and I'm ready to go for it with Natalie.
It's such a funny world.
True story, guys. True story.
Not uncommon.
Or like I'll be kind of breaking down about something and Bob's like supporting me with it, and then he's just like, I'm so turned on right now. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, I mean, emotional freedom, man. Like that to me is the place.
Yeah, that's intimacy, that's turn on, that's the essence of all of it.
Amen. I mean, that's the essence of all of it, right? That's
as far as I can tell.
As far as I can fucking tell, too. I mean, I too have my, my sexuality really began to come online when I was a surfer kid in junior high. And I was getting Surfer Magazine. And in Surfer Magazine, reef sandals from Brazil were advertising very heavily during that period. It was the mid to late 80s. And their advertisements were all this one particular kind of girl with this one particular kind of ass in a particular kind of bikini. And and it was like the very first thigh gap girls. And they would always have like the mountains behind the girl that you could see through her thigh gap. And that just became the thing that I knew to be attracted to. And I was that was sort of a demon for me for years. I mean, I had relationships with women like that, and I also had relationships with other kinds of women. And, but the thought that somehow that initial programming caused me to think that I had to be with women like that. They also had a particular kind of hair, dark curly hair. It's gone. It's just gone for me now. You know that I'm sure I still see those women walk down the street and I'm attracted to them, but there used to be a need, and the need is just absolutely evaporated. And so when I hear you talk about this, I hear reflections of that. And
Yeah. Well, just what comes up as I hear you talking about the example of the Surfer Girl ads is I definitely resonate, and I feel that I'm in the middle of that process. And this has been one of the, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it on our last conversations. This is one of the places I'm hardest on myself is like I see that I'm being attracted to a stereotypical version of attraction, and I'm excluding these other things, and why shouldn't they be beautiful? Is it just my socialization? And so I can kind of shame myself for that, for not being more enlightened or something like that. And within all of that, there's this genuine inquiry of, okay, well, we're all attracted to certain things. It's human nature. So what am I attracted to? And so I'm just still very much in this process of digging around in the muck and rather getting the muck out of the situation and seeing what is going to emerge as the muck gets cleared out. And it's starting to happen little bit by little bit, but I'm still very much in process around it too.
One of the challenges in what you're talking about, Bob, is that if you take that concept to its ultimate conclusion, you could ultimately just be attracted to anyone or anything. Mm-hmm. But there's a huge difference, aside from the fact that Natalie's a beautiful woman. There's a huge difference, which is that you are actually attracted to Natalie. It's not as if you're trying to convince yourself
totally.
that you're attracted to something you're not attracted to. You are actually physically in this moment attracted to her, and you will probably be having sex after this program. So it's
Probably.
The phenomenon for me isn't that, it's that there's this conceptual piece in the way. That's the trick of it. It's purely conceptual because your body is fine.
Well, yes, and the conceptual stuff that happens is more symptomatic of emotional trauma.
It is a question that might not be answered.
Right. I don't think it ever actually can be. I think it has to be a verb.
The fascinations of taboo and turn on.
Yeah. and it's how can I enjoy this process of inquiry as deeply as possible.
Yeah.
Right. Fascinations of taboo and turn on. I think that might be the title of the episode.
Let's do it.
As I was editing this episode, there was one phrase that kept jumping out at me. At one point, Natalie says that she feels the most safe with Bob of anyone she knows. Now, I don't know what's ultimately going to happen with these two. Their relationship is in transition, obviously, as all relationships are all the time. But I do know that vulnerability, especially the kind that's extremely hard to share, is how you build depth. Bob had to say something that he desperately wanted to avoid, and Natalie had to make space for him to do that, and then he had to make space for her to share her reaction. Those are 3 extremely difficult steps to follow, but they're also critically important to a healthy relationship. Neither of these two would have wanted to have this experience in advance, but each of their willingness to face the issue has caused them to grow and deepen. Now I have to say, this is the most difficult part of telling the story. This was over 2.5 hours of tape that we cut down to less than half an hour. And the hardest part to capture is the inescapable fact that becomes clear over the breadth of that tape, that confronting this issue has caused these two to feel deeper and more connected than they ever could have before. And regardless of what form their relationship takes now, that communication was the right move. If you liked what you heard on our show today, please subscribe. It's not free to produce this show, and we would love your support. If you've got questions or comments, or if you just want to connect, you can find us on social media. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show, and you can always email me at host@together.guide. The music in our episode today was provided by Mon Plaisir. I think I pronounced that right. You can find it on freemusicarchives.org. That's all for today, folks. Talk to you next week.